No,
catching up from being in Vegas.
here is the essence of this show is going to be human potential. And,
Ooh,
and what we want to draw together are people with various disciplines, backgrounds, just being themselves. So we're going to steer away from anyone having prepared some elaborate looking Hollywood set to just human beings.
definitely not that.
Well, that's what we're looking for. We're just looking for,
Good.
hey, we're talking to you in your home. You've
That's right.
taken a few moments out of your hectic day for us to explore opportunities. I would say that the essence of what's happening in the world is we have come to what Schumpeter would call creative destruction. It's the breaking down of existing systems that are no longer functional, which is why we have so much discord, wars,
Yep.
polarization. And during these times, it's very troubling to most people. So, what people need are those that are clear, that see in this chaos there is opportunity as the world reforms. So,
You are
social,
speaking my language.
I got that from looking at your website. So,
Well, good. Then that means the message is coming through, which is great.
so let me ask you this. Obviously, you started your career very many years ago and the world was a different place.
Yes.
What caused you to start your career?
Ooh. So you're saying career in terms of me being on my own?
Yeah, obviously there was a path that led you there where you developed the early skills, found out what you didn't
Yep.
want to do, learned from that, and then you said, ah. And I don't know
So
about you, but when I come up with an idea and I launch into reality, the problem is reality gets in the way of my idea. I don't know if that happens to you.
yeah, we may share some DNA, David, because it sounds like maybe a brother from another mother, but absolutely so I would say yes, lots of lead up to, and I'll use founding Firestarters Inc. 6 years ago. In fact, last week, thanks to LinkedIn, reminded me that that was my 6 year anniversary. And I had met Marcus on a plane, and I happened to be in Vegas on the day that I was celebrating that anniversary. No coincidence. I am convinced of that.
I agree.
So a couple of things really, some that I had control over and some that I had no control over. So what prompted me to start my company was receiving the gift of severance from the company that I had been with for about 10 years, who did a reorg and decided that I can say this now as I've worked through it in therapy and just gotten some more distance and clarity. I was a fire that they couldn't contain, and they weren't interested in trying to figure out how to have a controlled burn that would help their people.
You were a
And
threat. You were a threat to where they wanted to go in their mind.
yes, that's a way to put it, for sure. And so I had been, since I was 19 or 20, been carrying around with me either a manila folder or a spiral bound notebook that said MOB on it, which did not mean I was going to make a mob family sometime in the future. It stood for my own business. And I knew that one day I was going to do that. I just didn't know what that was going to look like. And so I when I received that gift of severance, I was in the process of writing a book, which is right up there on my shelf. And so I decided I'm going to take the severance that I got. I'm going to finish the book. And I hired somebody to help me put all of my thoughts into a framework, because I also will tell you, in the changing world and the way things are, the discord that I was experiencing, I did not have a lot of confidence in my own message. And I actually shared this little piece with Marcus the other day, a good friend of mine who is a very successful sales coaching business owner. Told me, he said, because he told me that I should be a consultant. And this was before I was miserable in my job, but before they had let me go. And he said, Jason, all that stuff that you know that you've done every day of your life to make you successful, that you just do because it's who you are. I was like, yeah. He said, 75% of the world doesn't know that stuff. And I like got in his face. I'm like, that's BS. There's no way that 75% of the world doesn't know this stuff. because it's not rocket science. And he said, I'm telling you, it's 75%. And the other 25% that have heard it need to be reminded. And so, David, I set out on a quest for a year to prove him wrong, because I was convinced it was more like 25-75. And what I came out the other end with after a year of literally being very intentional and putting some nuggets out into the world that I just thought, like, everybody knows this. I would say it's more like 85-90, 10-15 that don't know or that need to be reminded. And so finding my voice was really important. And when I wrote my book, when I hired my editor, she read the book. I thought I was done. And she said, Jason, I love the book. I love the framework. I love the ideas. I love the characters, all the things. She said, there's just one major problem with your book. And I said, what's that? She said, there's not enough of your story in your book. And I hired her on purpose because she knew me well. And I kind of.
Let me ask you this on that point. Two things.
Yeah.
It sounds like you undervalued your talent, your natural.
Oh, 100%.
And isn't that a problem for most people, especially talented people, where they undervalue the strengths and the gifts that they have? Yes. And then number two, because of that, you didn't think your story had value to include in the book. That's your
right.
Story, right?
Right. And that's exactly what I told her. I said, I don't believe enough in my story yet to put it in there. And she said, well, we need to change that. And so we did. We went back and did it. And I will tell you, since then, one of the things that I created for my book, and I've started collecting them, and I think this will be very interesting for you. But in the book, I've been an English teacher for over 25 years. I have a master's degree in English. I've been a college professor. I could not find the word that I wanted to encapsulate the negative thoughts, the imposter syndrome, all the swirling chaos that's in your head, all the doubts, all that stuff.
So I've been trained into us since we were kids.
Yes, 100%. And I'll get that's a good bridge to something that I want to tell you about that is connected to this word that I have that I created is called what if abouts. It doesn't roll off the tongue super easily, but the reason I named this word what it is because when we have those ideas and we think we're special and we think we can do something and we get excited and the endorphins kick in, and for 30 to 45 seconds to a minute or maybe more if you're somebody like we are and you maybe go 2 or 3 minutes, and then the what if abouts come in, like, who do you think you are? What makes you so smart? What if that doesn't work? What if you fail again? What if you fail again for the 4th or 5th time?
It's somebody like an airplane taking off. You're getting into the zone. You're feeling so excited, and then a little weather comes up.
Yep. Totally. It's like you're back down at the hangar before you know it. And it's like, how do we get out of this? And so for me, I realized one of my big what if abouts is I was told when I was a 16-year-old kid in high school by my geometry teacher that I was unteachable, because he was standing over me in class and pointing to a geometric illustration. And I had asked lots of questions, and I think he thought I was being a smart ass and trying to be annoying. And I'm like, I don't get it. And he's standing over me in class. He's getting madder and madder, and his voice is getting louder. And he says, it's right there in the it's right there. He's like, don't you see it?
He's telling you, I'm not a bad teacher. You're a bad student.
Right. Totally. So he, and I didn't get it. I'm embarrassed. He's embarrassing me in front of all my classmates. Like, I felt stupid. My head was like just a swimming mess of stuff, and I couldn't make any order out of it. And at the end of that, he goes, well, I guess you're just unteachable. And so I was like, well, guess what? We're going to make that a self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'm not going to do a lick of work in your class the rest of the semester, and I'm going to show you how unteachable I am. He wound up giving me a D because he wanted me to pass and didn't want me back in his class. But flash forward 6 years from that, I went to an eye doctor, and he was doing some stuff, and he goes, not the thing you want to hear when you're in the chair of a doctor. He goes, huh. And I was like, you got any more context than that? And he goes, well, hold on. He did the little test thing again. He goes, wow, that's really interesting. Still not giving me any context. I'm like, come on, like, help me out. He literally gets up, walks out into the hallway, goes, hey, Fred, come in here. So I'm like, great. So now
let
Fred,
me show you this anomaly.
Yeah,
Fred.
let's poke the guinea pig, right? Let's see what happens. So he comes in and basically, long story short, he gives me the medical definition of whatever it is, but he says, you have monocular vision. And I said, I don't understand what that means. And he said, he said, did you play sports growing up? And I said, yes. He said, what did you play? And I said, baseball. He said, and then he said, were you any good? And I was like, not really, actually. And I said, when I connected with the ball, which was rare, I said, I hit a couple out of the park home runs. But I usually swung way too early or way too late. He goes, can you parallel park a car? I said, not to save your life. And he said, your brain works in such a way that when you read with one eye. I was a terrible reader. I got really frustrated with reading, thought I was a dumb kid for a long time. Fell behind in English, never read the books because I would read a line and then my eye would skip a line, 2, 3, because I had no depth perception. Right. And I'd read it and I'm like, that doesn't make sense. So I'd go back up and I'd read the same line and then I would wind up reading the same line again. Well, I also have ADHD, so I wouldn't realize that I'm reading the same line until I got to the end of it the second time. And I'm like, it was such an epiphany for me that it's not that I was unteachable. It's that he didn't get curious. He didn't ask what the problem was. It was, here's the method, apply the method. And this is basically the only way this thing works. And if you can't do that, then you're a hopeless case. And I find so many people who are micromanaged by managers who don't know how to delegate, who are unsure of themselves, who don't know what they're doing. And so they project.
They're not really managers, they're criticizers.
Yes. I mean, managers by title.
They're
yes.
Criticizers.
Right. 100%. And I see so many people who are so afraid. I managed a sales team for a while, and it was we were in the financial services world, and it was a very complicated products that we were responsible for. There's no way that one person could know all of the answers. And what I told my team is I said, look, if you get an answer or if you get a question that you don't know the answer to, I am fine with you saying I don't know once, but then you bust your hump to go find the answer to exceed the expectation that you've given that customer. And then you've learned something. And that's how we started, grooming our subject matter experts on our team, because people would say, "Ooh, well, I found out about this and I really love that." Great, you're the go-to person. So every time we got that call, we sent it to Chris, and every time we got this call about that, we sent it to Sarah.
Did you come up with this process yourself? You thought this must be the you'll like to know this if you don't already. Google did an investigation of the top productive teams they had in the entirety of Google. So they're all geniuses. So you'd think they'd all produce genius work, but it wasn't true. The teams that did the best work had a vision together, but here's the important part that you just hit on. It was always all right to come forward with your stupid idea without fear of ridicule. And those were the teams that just zoomed past everybody, because the stupid idea sometimes would turn out to be the idea that turned the whole course of where the team was going and made them that next level.
Yes. I agree with that 100%. And I did say, like, you can't answer the phone and say, I don't know every time. Like, we hired you for a reason, right? You have to have some baseline skills, but I'm okay with you not knowing. And what I have found, so when I started my business, I had always, even before I started my business, I had always, describe myself as a constantly curious person. I just had an interview with somebody last week, and he said, you've said the word curious like 4 times. Tell me where that comes from. What about curiosity gets you excited? And I read an article soon after I started my own business that curiosity is one of the top characteristics that help foreshadow leadership in people, because good leaders are curious. They want to know the answer. They can say, I don't know. They are comfortable enough in their own skin to ask the awkward question, to say the thing that they don't know. And because I've been in adult education for 25 years, I know, and facilitated as much as I have, I know that if I'm asking the question, and I'm a pretty smart guy, if I'm asking the question and I don't know, there are at least 3 or 4 other people in the room who don't know, who are also, they won't say it out loud usually, but they're very thankful that you've asked the question, because now they get the answer too.
Without letting people know that they were stupid. Right. I mean, that's
Right.
that. I'm not saying they're stupid, but you know
Right.
that feeling,
No, you're
you
right.
know that feeling.
Yeah, you're 100% right. And I've just I wear one of my t-shirts that I wear for my company says comfortable being uncomfortable. And I am just convinced that the problem with comfort zones is that they're comfortable and it's hard to leave. You know, when you think about your favorite place to be on a Sunday afternoon with your favorite comfort food under your favorite blanket, eating your, you know, watching your favorite show, like it's nice to be there, but you can't stay there. You'll just grow into Jabba the Hutt.
Have you noticed that people can become comfortable with what's familiar that's not even pleasant? They're so
Oh,
comfortable with the familiar, which is a life that they hate. They would rather have the life that they hate than push beyond the boundaries and explore the possibility, I guess, in their mind, of something worse.
right. It's that whole, you know, the devil, you know, and I've never, you know, part of the going back, another piece of the reason that I started my own business when I got out is because I had looked around and I'm like, I see so many of my friends who work in this company and work in all kinds of other companies who are miserable, absolutely miserable. And there was one guy, I told this story last week at my keynote. There was one guy, I happened to get on the elevator with him many, many times a week for whatever reason. And he was a miserable guy. And I'm the kind of person that when I get on the elevator, I get on and face everybody. So if you're an introvert, you hate me because I'm like, hey, what's up? How we doing? How, you know? And I knew lots of people in the company that I worked in. And this guy, we would wind up on the elevator several times, just the two of us. Now I always ask him the same question. I said, hey, Jim, how you doing, man? You know, with that kind of, and this was exactly the way he responded every single time. And I must have asked him over 100 times during the course of the time that I was there. This is what he would say.
With the little breath at the end.
Yeah, the whole and then this was the verbal response. Not bad for a Monday.
And it could be Tuesday or Wednesday.
And I was going to say, you insert whatever day. It was the same if it was Wednesday. On Friday, he got a little excited because it was the weekend.
But he's like, a couple days.
Yeah, he's like, it's Friday, and he goes, and even sometimes he would follow it up. He's like, well, it's Friday, but it's going to be Monday. And I'm like,
formula for depression. He could teach
oh
it.
My
He could teach a depression
gosh,
course. Human depression brought down to a fine science.
And he was unflappable in that place, and it was the devil that he knows. He hated his job, he hated his boss. But you know, when I asked him a couple times, like, what are you going to do? Like, why don't you go do something else? And he had been so beaten down. And this is the part for me as somebody who owns a company called Firestars Incorporated. For me, the thing that was so tough to see is that his inner fire, that ember that I believe we have all been given to work into a flame. I believe that is our life's work.
We're born with it.
We are born with it. We are born with it. And guess what? Yours looks different than mine, than Marcus's, than anybody else that we could put on here. Similar in some ways, similar fuel, burns in the same way, will stay hot for longer if you do certain things, but very different. And here's the thing. I don't want your fire and I don't want Marcus's fire. I got my own fire and it's enough for me to do. And I got a lot of work figuring that thing out. Jim was a pile of wet ash. And I mean, even in a pile of wet ash, there's a little bit of heat buried deep in there, but you got to work to pull it out. And you've got to, you got to put some kindling on it. You got to breathe some fresh fire into it. It takes some work.
Can you imagine what the world looks like through his eyes? Dr. Joe Dispenza says, we don't see the world the way it is. We see the world the way we are. And that's all you can see is what you're willing to notice. There's things all over, but what do you choose to focus on? And what meaning do you give to what you focus on?
And that's one of the reasons that I love what Brene Brown says, and she's made $1 bajillion from this phrase. The story I'm telling myself in my head is, and then you fill in the blank, because you are seeing the world through your own filter. If I take off these glasses, I'll still be able to see you guys, but you're not going to be as crisp and clear as you are. If I drive up to the place that I'm going right after this without my glasses on, I'll get there. It's going to be disorienting. Like, and what I've learned is that, you have interactions with people and people don't, maybe they're having an off day. So they make a comment that you take a particular way. And if you see the world as a soaking wet pile of ash, That's the way you're going to perceive everything that's coming in.
And you will attract it. You will
And
attract what you.
and he did. And he hit literally his, like, I never thought about this like this before, but gosh, like in attracting, you see people who are like that. And I've seen people who are in their 40s and people who are in their 80s who walk hunched over, bent over. It's they literally are wearing the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they're attracting more weight everywhere they go. And for me, I was challenged at a leadership conference by a gentleman named TD Jakes. He's I'm familiar with him. Yeah, big megachurch pastor down in Texas. And he asked two questions, and the first one was had faith in it because he's a man of faith. But I think even if you're not a faith person, it's an important question. And his question was, if you serve a magnificent God, do you have a magnificent vision to match? And I was like, man, I have a mission, or a vision, but it is not magnificent. And so that was a challenge to me. And the other thing that he said, which literally changed my life from that moment that I heard it, because I was still in the corporate world, he said, if you are a leader, whose permission are you waiting for to lead? And a really good friend of mine was sitting behind me, and she poked me in the back when he said that, because she knew the place that I was in. And I'm telling you that if your vision is attainable by you simply rolling out of bed, that's not a vision. That's a task. Were
you afraid if you became a leader, one, either no one would follow you, or two, even worse, that people would, and you would lead them into a ditch? Did you think of that, or was it?
I didn't think of the second thing, because I was confident. I mean, I've been in leadership since I was 12 years old, literally going to leadership things. So that's been something forever. My biggest concern, and I would say, like, writing that book, putting my message out into the world, was not that people would think that I'm crazy or that they would criticize me. I grew up as a very pale-skinned, very freckle-faced, red afro having kid in the 70s. You cannot make fun of me more than I make fun of me. You can't. It's impossible. I will out diss you on my own life worse than anybody can diss me. So I'm not afraid of that. I don't care, that criticism piece. Honestly, David, the thing that like welled up inside of me and gave me that like anxious feeling was that I would do this and it would just fall flat and nobody would care. That was the thing. I'm like, what if I do this and it just meets with absolute indifference? It's just a quick wind that blows and is gone.
What if all you did by all your efforts was to prove you were worth nothing? That's a hard one to think about, right? That's a hard one to think about. It will certainly keep someone from becoming magnificent, won't it?
Oh, 100%. So my magnificent vision is to change the world one fiery heart at a time. One fire. And I realize there's a lot of people in this world. That's a lot of hearts. But I also subscribe to the idea that the people who change the world are the ones who are crazy enough to think that they can.
And each of those people who you afford a chance to change will at least change one other. And if they get on fire, it probably explodes geometrically.
And I shared a video with Marcus. Maybe he can send it to you. But I shared a video. I started talking to two ladies in Vegas the other day on my way back, and we wound up having this long conversation about different things, what they were doing, where it all started with the question, and it was, where you ladies heading or coming from? And so we started down that road. And, as you do sometimes in those situations, you don't introduce yourself until the end of the conversation, which is what we did. And she said, "What's your name?" And I said, "My name's Jason." And she goes, "Oh." And she looked at her friend, and her friend looked at her, and they both kind of smiled. And I was like, what's
is that a bad name?
Like, yeah, like, what's going on? And she said, the lady who was sitting directly next to me, she said, that was my husband's name, and the anniversary of his death is tomorrow.
Oh.
And I'm getting choked up talking about it right now, just like I did when I was talking to her. Like,
so you didn't meet them by accident?
No, absolutely not. And when I travel, I travel with some books in my backpack to give away to people if, the opportunity arises. And so I did. And I signed it and I said, hey, I know that your Jason would want you to keep fanning your flame. And even though it's hard, and, I gave it to her and we said goodbye, and she didn't read it when she was sitting there. And I walked down a couple of stores to get some chocolate to bring home for my wife. And she must have seen me before I saw her, because I turned around and she was standing right there. She had tears in her eyes. And she said, I just read what you wrote in the book for me. And she said, I want you to know that it's already moving me. Yeah. And I can't wait to read it. And she goes, can I give you a hug? Yeah. And the thing is, like, if you stood the two of us next to each other, we don't look anything alike. We did not come up. I'm assuming, just on the pieces and parts of things that I heard from her story and knowing mine, we grew up in different situations. We have different backgrounds. We're from different cultures, all those things. And we are so much more alike than we are different. And it was such a powerful,
isn't that really
interaction?
The key is really, we are all alike. Yeah. And unfortunately, what's happened in politics is we've gone to opposite ends, and we've come from what I believe is shame to blame.
Yes. Yeah. So
in our life, we don't want that, so we deflect it and blame others. So you get the polarization of political parties, and the amount of hate that's coming up in the world because of that is causing wars. And here we are at a moment where we, as people that are aware of this, realize the gift that we're all born with. We just happen to be willing to come out there and look for who can we serve, who can we help. And there, when you least expect it, because that's on your mind, up shows this woman who needed exactly what you had. And because you're paying attention, you were able to not only notice, but to give to her.
Yeah.
That's magnificent.
And I'm telling you that it I got way more back than I gave. And I think that's when
she probably thinks the same thing.
She probably does.
That's the beauty of
it is.
Love,
and
right?
And when you
it's love.
Yes.
Pure love.
Yes. And when you're authentically you, and your intent is, I like that phrase that you said, like, when your intent is to serve, like, just how can I be of service? And, I was texting with a friend about that whole encounter, and I said, there's so much masked pain in our world. And I just feel like people are waiting. Like I heard somebody say a couple of weeks ago, and I love this. They were challenging leaders. They said, if you are a leader, I challenge you to walk through the halls of your organization, find a couple of people that you have pretty good relationships with, because it won't work with a stranger. Find somebody that you have a good relationship with and say, hey, how are you doing? And they're going to say, fine, great, living the dream, whatever the stupid default phrase is that they go to every time. And he said, when you hear that, he said, I want you to stop and I want you to look them in the eye and say, no, how are you really doing? And he said, I guarantee you the answer that you get to the first question and the answer you get to the second question will be very different. And they will feel seen and heard and understood. And I'm telling you, in today's world where we're all retention and engagement, and how do we get these people? How do you get your people, and how do you get them to stay? Let them know that you care, that they matter, that their voice is important, that you're happy that they're there, because you can throw $20,000 at them to keep them, and in 6 months they will have spent the money and they're going to look for somewhere else to go, and they'll likely take a job for less money where they feel seen and heard.
Or equally as bad, 63% of all people in corporate jobs are disengaged. They'll still show up. They'll do the appearance of just enough not to get fired or not to get criticized, right? Yeah. That's why that persona answer is there, right? What can I say so I can disengage before I get criticized? I want to move on.
Can't tell you how many people I worked with in my corporate job who literally use the phrase, like, just trying to stay under the radar, 5 more years until until I can retire with the pension, just trying not to make waves, trying not to ripple, trying to survive the next round of layoffs.
And here's a sad news for them. with what's happening in the world financially, their pension fund may evaporate. So they may have put up with an empty life of pain to not even end up with enough financial reward at the end to eat and pay their bills.
Right.
This is for another topic that we'll go into, but the whole point of this platform is to explore what's going on and have people like us come together and say, okay, we appreciate that. Or the Ogmandino story, you already alluded to it. He's throwing the starfish in that are laying on the beach, drying out and dying, and someone criticized him. Almost everyone's heard this story. And what difference could you possibly make? He throws one in and says, what? I made a difference to that one. That's what we're talking about.
And I did a leadership engagement with a company here in Indianapolis. It's a nonprofit called the Starfish Initiative, and they are a mentoring organization for high school kids. And it's the same, like, there's so much need. There's so many kids that don't have this. How could you possibly make a dent? They're like, well, we're going to make a dent in the ones that we have.
Where does the problem start with our society? It starts with the children. Yeah. It starts with excited young minds that are creative and curious, and they get slammed down and go into an education system that's failing until they find. You see, there are some people with certain gifts that can get through what I'm describing, and they just seem to be gifted with what is needed in skills and talents to get through that, and they succeed. Now, I'm not saying they're happy, but they can pay their bills. Maybe they're famous movie stars. It doesn't matter. But that's a small population. Did you, by chance, watch the video about Imad Mystique, the guy that is with Stable Diffusion? He founded it. He won an endowment from Tony Robbins and Elon Musk for $15 million to educate children that are in refugee camps. And they took the money, bought tablets so that you wouldn't need access to the internet, and they loaded an artificial intelligence program in there and then gave it out in the camps. The program learned from the children. So the experience you had where you're dumb, it didn't happen. It's like, oh, this child needs to learn this way. And it would do
oh my gosh.
Loop. Here's what happened. In 13 months, 1 hour a day, 13 months, 1 hour a day, these children learned, 76% of them learned literacy and numeracy without access to the internet, living in abject poverty and horrible circumstances. What does that tell you about the failure of education when kids sit 6 hours a day in the classroom, which isn't necessary, having someone repeat to them what's been said since 1640, the same way, the same time, while they almost doze off and fall out of their chair in boredom. And then if they're like you and me and maybe Marcus, if they don't have the natural born facility to learn in that environment, what did you think? You think they're stupid. I got put in a class with mentally retarded and disabled children because I had severe dyslexia and I couldn't read. And they didn't know what to do with me. And of course, bless those children, because the obstacles they have to overcome in their life is far beyond what I've had to deal with. But I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? I grew up as a kid thinking, man, I'm just stupid. I'll be lucky if I can just how can I get by? And what I've ended up doing is working 100 times harder than most people have to. And made my way through. But the point of the story is the failure of our education system, if you don't fit in, is horrific.
Well, and you're talking to somebody who was a teacher who got out of teaching because I couldn't make a living. Can you imagine the impact that somebody like me would have on kids?
But you couldn't afford to stay.
I couldn't stay. The 2 years that I worked education full time, David, I had 6 other W-2s and I tell people those were the legal jobs that I did. Like I was cutting grass, I was painting houses, I was detailing cars.
Just to survive. You weren't getting wealthy.
Oh, hell no. I was getting tired is all I was getting.
Of course. And when you're young, you can drive that. As you get older and older.
Yeah, I'm 52. That story, just telling you that story makes me want to go take a nap.
I mean, have you heard the heart attacks and strokes? And, right? And where does that come from? A lifetime of stress and mismanagement of what you eat and what you there is such a need, and I want to thank you so much for coming to appear and start another seed that
I appreciate it.
So let me ask you this you had an idea and you finally started your business about 6-7 years ago, and you've been out in the world while it's going through transition, and it's accelerating, isn't it? It's getting we'll call it, is breaking down at a more rapid pace than we've ever seen before. And the human being doesn't adjust rapidly to change, but they're being forced to. So are you changing your business in 2023 to address this need so that
Yes.
you can be the most effective man that you can be? So how are you changing?
So um, I used to build I'll use this metaphor. I used to build boxes and take them to the market and hope that the market would like the box.
Pretty common. That's a very common.
And what I yep, and based on, and I didn't do it just willy-nilly. Like I had some feedback and I had some ideas, but what I found is I would take the box and I'm like, this is not sustainable. It's the customer acquisition piece, like to get an individual B2C, it's a lot of work, it's a lot of reps, it's a lot of just a lot.
Economics don't work, and even worse than that, the energy gets just drained out.
Yeah, totally.
I've done something similar to that. I finally got to the level of economic success I wanted, and my life sucked. I didn't have a life.
Right.
It was like I was running for office as soon as one gig was starting to wind down,
right.
I was already running for office for the next
right.
gig.
So what I'm doing is taking skill. So I currently have 3 different retainers with companies to do, which is interesting because it's not what I do necessarily on the surface, but I'm working for 3 different companies on retainers, helping with business development, sales coaching, and sales leadership.
So have they seen 2023 as a threat to their business? They're bringing you in to see what they can do to get through that?
They know that they need to do. So one of the people is like, we've tried lots of things. It's not working. We need something else. And he said, I'm willing to make a bet on you because I think you're bringing that something else that we need, and figure out how to make that work. So that to me, I would much rather work for a leader like that who says, I don't really know if this is going to work, but I think it might. And I think the 2 of us and the company that we have, like we could come up with some cool stuff, versus somebody who says, you have this skill set. Here's the box that we have. Come and fit into the box because it's the way that we've always done it. Nope. That's
a formula for going out of business.
That makes me break out into a rash.
That's what's going to happen.
Yeah. And unfortunately, gents, I got to run because I've got to get in the car and head up to the north side.
This is more than I expected. I would like to
great
possibilities in the future. I would like to come back and be a guest in the future. I'd like to share with you future shows that we have. Marcus, you want to close us up? He's my silent partner. He's got a depth that goes far beyond me, but he always sits back and says nothing. Mark, you want to help us close out?
Okay, I close out by saying that there's no accidents, there's no coincidences, and I'm so glad that I got a chance to meet Jason. I told David, Jason, that, and I told you, I never in life, and I've traveled on planes for 50 years since I was 10. Never have I talked the whole time. Never in life. Never. I'm telling you right now. So that was just a great blessing. I'm glad we connected. We're not that far apart. I mean, in terms of where we live. We can have coffee, dinner, whatever. So I'm just really glad we connected synergistically.
Yeah.
And so we'll talk again, Jason, when you got some time, and we'll get together and collaborate again, guys. I appreciate you, Jason, for coming on, sir.
Appreciate you both as well. And David, always a great, like I could just tell that, we have lots of similarities, and I love to meet people who are like-minded, like-hearted, like-spirited. And I definitely found that in Marcus. And I love the fact that I'm a big believer in what Jim Rohn says, that we are the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. I curate my tribe very carefully. And I always love to find people like both of you who are clearly have a lot of energy, have a lot of wisdom, things that I can learn from. And what I love about this conversation is I feel like we're just scratching the surface. So
to helping a troubled world transcend and become something more spectacular than we used to be. I want to be part of that. I welcome you.
Yes, and amen.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thanks, gentlemen. Bye-bye.
Take care now. We'll see you later on. We're hanging up now.